All right, with this video we're going to begin putting in some detail on our bird. I'll start by mixing the colors that I'm going to use for the head. This video will be specifically focused on the head, and then subsequent videos will take us further into the belly and the back and the legs and so on and so forth. We'll probably end up finishing with the tail and the grass. But what I'm doing now is pre-mixing my colors, and I do this quite often. And it just helps ground me in the space that I'll be working in. Instead of just going for it and mixing colors on the fly, I actually like to go ahead and pre-mix several colors, maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 for each thing I'm doing. The colors that I see here are important, and I'm going to capture those with these mixtures. I'll go for the darkest tone or the darkest color that I see, and then I'll go for the lightest. And I'll usually go for 3, maybe 2 or 3 values or different colors within that range. So I have the lightest and the darkest color that I'm going to be using, and a few in between. So I've started with the darker red that I see, and again, I'm going to the reference here. I'm not looking at the painting. I'm going to the reference for these colors, the photograph that's on the right here. And whereas the block-in was just more concerned with getting the canvas filled with the generic color that was there, here I'm being very specific. I have a very, very specific, I should say focused, focused approach to this, and I have to have the exact color because this is going to be my final layer. This is what people will see when they look at my painting. The underpainting you see there on the left is going to be completely, well, with the exception of the sky, because we've already done that. But it'll be completely covered with the new color, with this new layer of color, I should say. So I've got the darkest color on the left there, and I've got a little ramp going from left to right. So the darkest color, then I have a lighter one, then I'm getting into the orange range, and then I'm getting into the yellows, and I'm doing a very light color now for the highlights. That'll be on the top of his head, and I'll blend those into the color that I have down when I get to that point. With this one that I'm working on here, I had wanted to create a deeper red that was roughly the same value as that darkest color I had, just so I could punch that red color a little bit. And now I'm making a black. The black mixture is simply ultramarine blue and burnt umber mixed together. And I'm looking for a neutral mixture, so roughly about 2 parts of the umber to 3 parts of the ultramarine. Now we'll get started painting. So I know I said in an earlier video that I was going to be using the filbert to do some of the detail. But now that I've gotten into it, I've decided to ditch that idea and stick with these really, really small rounds. These are synthetic rounds. I think the largest one I'm using is a size 1 there. This is my natural sable brush. This is a size 4. So I have to take back my previous statement. This is the largest brush I'll probably be using. Natural sable size 4. And the really small ones are size 1, size 0, and a size 00, I think. So to start off, I've decided to oil out the head. So I've just got some oil there on the palette that is left over from the sky when I did the sky. So I've got the oil there, and I'm just oiling out the head because that's the part I'm going to paint right now. And I'll continue to oil it out as I go when I move on to other areas. You'll see me do that. So oiling out gives me a nice slick surface to work on, and it restores the color, I should say the depth of color that was there after the paint had dried for the underpainting. The colors have a tendency to sink, especially if your substrate or your surface is too absorptive. So working on the eye, this is just straight black. Again, that is a chromatic black made from the burnt umber and ultramarine blue. I believe that brush is a 0. Can't really tell. I don't remember. It's either a 1 or a 0, and I'm just using it to deepen the eye with some more black. And a little bit more medium there. Just makes the paint a little bit more fluid. Also, I think I had forgotten to oil out the beak. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. Okay, so now onto the black. Again. And I'm just reinforcing the form that I had there before. I'm approaching this with the mindset that I'm going to paint over the entire thing again, which is probably 99% true. There may be a spot here and there where I inadvertently do not put any more paint down, but if I do that, it's extremely rare and unintentional. Maybe I just missed a spot, right? You should approach this with the intent, like I said, to repaint the entire thing. So the color that we have down reinforces what we put on top of it, and it looks much better than if you were to just do it all in one layer, a la Prima style. So I'm reaching down into the belly here. I don't want to focus on the belly at all, but I want to carry the shadow down because I know that's the darkest area. Actually, I think it's the darkest area besides the eyeball on the entire bird. So I wanted to put that in there, again, to anchor my visual calibration, if you will, just so I could see visually what the deepest value is, so I know not to go any darker than that. And I've decided to oil out the rest of the bird here, I believe, because I am going to paint the whole thing in one session, or at least up until the back. I think by the time I get to the back, I might have to put new paint out. And that's only because of the amount of time. I don't like working with stiff paint that's begun to dry. I like nice, fresh paint. So I'm getting into a little bit more detail here for the area surrounding the eye. And what I'm focusing on, again, this is a very simple process. It looks more complicated than it is. All I'm doing is taking the darkest values that I mixed and I'm putting them where I see them on the painting. And I'll work my way through that color range as well. Just articulating the shapes and the colors, you know, the forms that I see using the colors that I have available to me. And I'm not limited to those 5 piles that I initially made either. I can go ahead and adjust them, which I do, on the fly as I go. But for the most part, the entire bird's head is contained within those 5 piles of paint. Actually, there's 6 there. 6 piles of paint that I made. And all of the variations are just, you know, shifting it around within that range. So it's very meticulous. It's very, I don't want to say tedious. I mean, it looks tedious if you're just watching, but if you're in the zone, as they say, and you're zoned out, I guess would be the best way to put it. You know, there's this Zen thing that goes on where you completely lose track of time. You forget that you have to eat at some point. You forget about sleeping. You just get into your headspace, and sometimes you end up staying there a little bit too long, and that happens to me all the time. Sometimes it's difficult to come out of it. All of a sudden I'll realize I'm hungry, and then it's been 5 hours and the sun's down, and I'm, that's just the way it goes. So it's just a matter of taking those colors and reproducing as best as I can what I'm seeing. I'm using a very small brush, going very, very slowly, being meticulous about where I place the paint. Sometimes I'll put down a form or a shape and it'll be a little bit too dark intentionally. And if I do that, it's only because I have it in mind that I'm going to go back over it later and correct it. But by having the darker color down, it gives me something to blend into. I'm still working in the darker range there. We'll zoom in and give us a little bit of a closer look at it. I'll move on into the mid-range occasionally just to reestablish where some forms are. And that's really all I'm doing. I'm just going back and forth with the brushes. Sometimes I'll have 2 or 3 brushes going. One's for my darks, one's for my lights, and then I'll have one for my middle tones. But in this case, I think I just kept it to 1 or 2 brushes, and they're the same brush, so you won't notice that I've swapped them, unless you're paying really close attention. But that's not important. You can do the whole thing with 1 brush. All you have to do is wipe it off in between your major color changes. But there are times when it's helpful to have the color on the brush already, so that when you go to make a new color, you're blending what you had before with the new tone, so you have a nice transition when you go to paint it. And of course, there are times when it helps to have a completely fresh brush. But, it's just something you do subconsciously. You don't realize. I don't even realize I'm doing it. Watching myself paint here reminds me of the fact that I do it. It's not always necessary. There's no rule. But what I want to do is make sure that the value and the color that I'm putting down accurately describes what I see in the reference. And that's the most important thing. That's the key. That's the most important takeaway you can get from these videos, is that what I'm painting is not arbitrary. I'm not using a random color. I've analyzed it. And, you can even check your color up against your reference print. If you have a glossy print, you can literally paint right onto the print and make sure that you've got the right color before you paint with it. Take a few extra minutes and check your colors. Make sure that they're right. That's some solid advice. I'll be repeating myself quite a bit regarding that subject. This is all about study. This is about studying the colors that you see, and describing what you see with your paint, almost as though you were writing a description of it. So we're taking notes, and we're writing a journal, essentially, but instead of using words, we are writing it with color, shape, form. Sometimes it helps to think about things differently, and then all of a sudden, you'll have a moment of clarity where you say, "Oh, that's it. That's what I need to focus on." Sometimes it's just all about your mindset. See, here I'm in the mindset of feathers, individual hairs. So as I'm putting these strokes down, I'm paying attention to which direction the hair's going, or the fur, or whatever it is I happen to be doing. If it were a different animal, it wouldn't be any different. I'm paying attention to the flow of the hair. So I'm trying to keep most of my brush strokes, I'd say about 80 or 90% of them are all going in the direction that I see in that reference. Very, very short, choppy strokes, layered one on top of another, blended together. You know, it happens very slowly, but over time it comes together, and then you'll step back from it and look at it, and you'll say, yeah, that's what I wanted. Now here it's funny because the blue that I had put down is really contrasting well against this orange. And I'm so glad I made the decision to make that background blue. It's helping this thing look so much better because I've got these complementary colors right up against each other. And it creates this vibrating, intensity that just makes the bird pop right off of the background. Choppy little strokes, because that's what I see. I see those tiny little hairs. So I'm replicating that. I'm using the color that needs to go there, and I'm translating what I see. Just short, choppy little strokes. And there's no rule saying I have to do this. This is just the way I decided to do it. If I wanted to do it in bigger blocky shapes and make it look a little bit more impressionistic, that would be totally fine. I just chose to do it this way because this is how my brain works. Not everybody's brain works the same way. If you think in larger shapes, by all means use larger brushes. The most important part is getting your values and your colors correct, putting them where they go, and as long as it describes the form accurately, it works. Now it's going to look a little green here because it's going right over that blue, and the paint's not 100% opaque. It's got some transparency to it. So, just some things to keep in mind as you work. And we'll move along to the belly here in the next video.